Okay, we are live. Uh, Gary, you ready to get nuts?
You
Okay. On today's episode of Playing Small is Canceled, we have a titan who's made waves in multiple industries, and he's a dynamic entrepreneur, mentor, investor, and business advisor with a stellar track record. Big facts. He co founded GameStop and other massive companies, transforming them into global brands. As the former CEO of Kinko's, he led its turnaround and successful integration into FedEx, now known as the FedEx Office. No big deal. An Inc. magazine Entrepreneur of the Year award winner. He's also served on numerous boards and mentored over 1,000 people, just to name a few. He's just a juggernaut in all facets of life and a terrific human being. Please welcome the innovative and influential, the handsome and abundant, the master of leveling up, Gary Kusin. How you doing, Gary?
oh boy. Well, I'm better off with a low bar, Craig. I don't know what to do with.
Well, I love to have some fun, but as I always like to say, it's your story. You wrote it. I just said it with a funny New York accent.
Okay.
Well, I'm super
Okay.
pumped to be here. You're dialing in from Texas, and what an honor it is to have you and all your expertise and so forth. We're just gonna have so much fun. For our listeners in our community, in case you're not familiar, my best suggestion is do a deep dive, grab his book, play catch up, check out everything he's got going on. What I think is most valuable today is we just dive right in. But first, I have a little icebreaker for you. Are you ready for me, Gary?
I'm ready for you, Craig.
Okay. What does it mean to you to live an authentic life?
Well, first of all, that is a good question and a good icebreaker. I think for me it means without being too much like Pablum, being me. We're trying to be what others wanted me to be. I didn't end up in what I felt was a good place or slash authentic place. And as I met with more success in various things that I was doing, I had more confidence to be myself. But I certainly understand when people have to let their real selves out because it can be risky. And in some cases, it can damage your career. So authenticity for me is kind of a requirement. And I loved having direct reports who were not only authentic but very different. Than diversity of voices in a room I found was key in anything I did. So I'm a big fan of authenticity.
Yeah, same. And you know what's interesting? I noticed that it's one of the hardest things for anybody to accomplish is to really cultivate the courage to truly be themselves. But yet it's also one of the most rewarding things that you can do. Would you agree?
Sure, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And while I do appreciate why it feels risky, especially to younger people earlier on their journey, to let their real selves out, I don't know how if your interest is in moving on up or doing better and different things, sooner or later, you've got to let that authentic self out. Otherwise, you're gonna fail.
Mm. Amen. I love it. I could talk to you all day. This is going to be awesome. Let's dive right in. There's so many places we could take this. Your resume speaks for itself. And I want to talk about all the stuff that you have going on now and so forth. But you wrote a pretty epic book called Always Learning. And I think that it's one of the most important skill sets that you can cultivate is to always be learning and wanting to grow and expand. How come you came up with the concept for that book? Why is it so important for you?
Well, I came at it I had several different inputs, if you will, that collectively screamed that I had to write what I wrote. The first was when I sold FedEx, I got a ton of inbounds on that essentially were your results there were unbelievable. The sale to FedEx was even more unbelievable. You got to write something. And I got lots of pressure on that. And I started to I got a ghostwriter and talking about authenticity. I said, no, I'm not doing this. This does not feel right. It does not feel like me. I'm not going to do it. So but it was always in the back of my head, that pressure to write a book. In the intervening time, I went from 0 to 11 grandkids in record. Thought, gee, maybe I should write a love letter to my grandkids and talk about my life while I still had a brain in my head. And I started doing that, and then in a very typical fashion for me, I started getting to know the publishing world and decided publishers wanted me to, and rather than have them fire me or me fire them, I'd go my own path on it and assemble a team of people who regularly work for the big publishers, but that I could give permission to do it completely differently, because that's how I do it. And they told me, you can't write a love letter to your grandkids, you business story first. And I realized that you don't really, and you know this, by the way, I read your background too, Craig. You've realized this more than most people. You can't, sometimes you get on such a roll, you can't even remember stuff that you need to remember. So I decided to look at my life from the lessons learned point of view and start at my earliest age. And I got in this rhythm, and I was telling someone else this earlier that I'd start on the Peloton in the morning and I would pound it out. I'd pound out a few miles about the book. And by the time you get the endorphins going, I'd jump off the Peloton after 45 minutes, race down to my computer and start pounding. And I got in a rhythm. I was doing that every day. And the putting what I had down on paper was the third input, because like you, I could 100 hours a week mentoring people. And it had occurred to me that I needed a more efficient way to talk with people. And I thought, if I could collect my stories and put them in a way that people could learn from them and add the lessons learned at the end of each part, that would help more people maybe gain what mentoring input I might have from doing that, and then the combination of the podcast with Jill.
Yeah, I love this, and it's so good, so relatable to me, because it's one thing to achieve success in the world, and then it's a totally different connection when you share your wisdom, right? Without an agenda, you're not needing recognition. You just want to share the lessons that you've learned and help others. It's a totally different level of fulfillment, I've noticed. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And it gets to something that's really a difference between my mentoring and other people's mentoring, as I've kind of learned about how other people mentor. Because of these stories and these experiences, I am a Socratic kind of guy. I ask lots of questions. I am not prescriptive. I will not find the word should in my vocabulary in talking with people that I might be mentoring. And so I literally ask a lot of questions, and then invariably a scene will pop into my head from my career, and I think I understand where you're coming from and what your issue is. Let me tell you about something that happened to me earlier in my career, and let me tell you how I thought about it. Let me tell you what my options were, what my strengths and weaknesses were of each option, and the course I took as a result of that, and maybe it can help you. So I go, and then I go for the aha moment that a founder might have, or a co-founder, or someone looking for mentoring advice, what they can take out of my stories versus what I might have relayed to them as essential from my stories, because I don't do that. And I write this is literally my very first part of the book. I have a couple of really strongly held beliefs about each person, and kind of packaged succinctly. Everyone carries their lives, and inside their baggage, if you will, is every good and bad thing that ever happened to them. And the sum total of each person's lifetime, things that have happened to them that's in their baggage, all work together to create a prism through which they view the world. And for some people, very bad things happening to them in their life, their worldview is very dark. It's not a good place to be. They have concerns, they have worries. For other people who may have had more positive experiences, and I'm talking about family, work, whatever, they optimistic in a more optimistic view of the world. And everyone's prism, I believe, is different. So I don't think I am qualified to tell you, Craig, what to do in a situation, because I can't and couldn't see the world through the prism that you brought. But what I can do is share, and that's how I mentor. And I've found the feedback I've had is that is a very powerful way to mentor, and I enjoy it.
That is so beautiful. And when I started studying NLP about 15 years ago, one of the big ideas and concepts is that people don't actually look at the world as it is, but through their map or lens of the world. And then
Yes.
some people might see limitations and some people might see opportunities, but it's all based upon their specific map. And I love that you do something very similar.
Yes.
You take that into consideration because you don't know how somebody else is perceiving the world. So you can only share how you did and what you did. That's great.
Yeah, and if you think about that should thing, something that might feel very good to me and very obvious and very intuitive and very easy for someone to grasp, if I tell you that and your prism is different, I can't do that. So I don't want to limit someone. I want to help them expand their horizons.
Ooh, I love it. This is so good. So many places we could take this. I wanted to ask you this just selfishly. What is one of the most valuable lessons that you've learned from building and nurturing businesses throughout your career?
Good. So it's a lesson that was hard learned for me at Kinko's and only came out of a result of a 360. The first had never been part of. I'd been doing 360s, but I'd never had myself evaluated by the people that report to me and by my peers and by my supervisors. And bottom line on that process was, while I am really good at reaching deep in to say, way to go, or here's our mission, or be very, the leadership role people expect from a CEO, I never was patting my own direct reports on the back. I never said way to go to them or thank you to them. And I realized through this process that everyone, and I mean everyone, likes to be told they're doing a good job when they're doing a good job. And congratulations, even people earning $1 million a year. People need affirmation that they are doing well, and not just in lower rungs in an organization, but all the way up. And when I learned that, and when I learned that was my biggest single deficiency in my management toolbox, and I sat down and figured out a path to kind of remediate against those things, the camaraderie, the teamwork that came from that was extraordinary. I was blown away because I grew up not kind of needing, I figured out how to live my life without people telling me congratulations and way to go. So I assumed everybody that reached my point in their career didn't really need, they didn't need someone saying way to go to them. Boy, was I wrong.
That's really, really powerful stuff. And I think a lot deeper than people realize. And I think it's actually a really good thing that you grew up without that, because nowadays, if your energy or mood changes based upon external validation, that could be very dangerous, because then you're always needing more and more and more. Obviously, it does feel good when someone tells you to do a good job, but you don't want to be reliant upon it, right?
Right. And it loses its impact if every morning I came into your office yesterday waiting, and I did that all the time. Well, that kind of reduces the value of that. But a well-placed way to go, or saying, let me tell you what I like most about what I watched you doing last week. Ooh. Those well-placed, timely kinds of feedback. And you can watch, and I'm talking big time senior executives. You can watch them sit straighter in their chair. You can watch them start getting a little smile on their face, well, that's when you know you're connecting, and you need those connections because business is messy. A landmine field one day, and you're going to need your team to all be ready to get in the foxhole together. And when you have that kind of camaraderie and morale built, we'll all fight to the death for each other because we're being authentic. Because by the way to go is, boy, Craig, I was pretty disappointed in what you did yesterday, and help me understand how you got to the point that you thought doing that was a good thing to do. When you're authentic and you're having those conversations, you don't take that, oh no, it's we talk about it and then we're done with it and then we move on.
Yeah, so good. And I like the way you frame that, right? And just much more intentional than your typical good job or way to go. Beautiful stuff.
Yeah. And that's how that is when you get authentic and the relationship gets authentic. That's when you need intention, and it's received. It's so much more powerful when you do that. And frankly, my editor, the first run through of my book, I truly believe my life had been a series of me into the next good thing, that I'm the luckiest SOB that ever lived. Well, my editor said, whew, I'm not sure. Hey, I understand how you got to that, but you have such intention in everything that you've done that I think you're doing yourself a disservice. Look at your prism through an intentionality focus on the various steps you made, the things you did, and sure enough, it ripped my lifetime puzzle, if you will, resonated with me as more authentic, which made me attack the manuscript, more as I needed to.
Yeah, so good. I imagine what you just described is one of the answers to this, but I'd love to also know from your perspective, from your prism, what makes a transformative and effective leader?
Sure. Well, I have evolved into 6 leadership principles, if you will, and without necessarily slogging through them. I believe the first and most important thing is, of a good leader, you have to be able to communicate to your organization an aspirational goal for your organization. You have to be able to describe a distant hill, and a hill that has a flag on it, and the reason that flag is worth taking, and the reason this has to adopt a strategy to charge that hill. So that is number one, is called alignment. You have to have people who buy into that vision. For everyone to buy into that vision, the senior leader has to be very articulate, has to be able to describe something in terms that make people feel like that is an honorable goal. That's something worth doing. And so that's the first one, is aligning people behind a vision. The second, and this is much more critical, and a good leader knows how to do this, is accountability. But what accountability really means is giving each member of the team the tools they need to accomplish their commitment. And I am shocked, as a board member, seen in my organizations, the number of people who, when I have a sit down and say, well, this was your commitment and you're failing on delivering on your commitment, help me with that. Well, I needed this tool and I needed that tool. I had neither of them. And when I went to the people who did have those tools, they wouldn't let me use them. Well, quickly veers into a very different conversation. But that's why, if it's not enough to be able to describe a hill that must be taken, but people need the tools. You can't give them responsibility without authority. And those are the kinds of things that I go deep when I'm running an organization, to ensure that everyone has the tools, and then we do it as a team, and I get into respect for others and honesty and integrity, those kinds of things. But when you get an organization that is truly wrapped around these kinds of principles, you end up with a chance at winning, I believe.
So good. So good. And it reminds me of something I saw you. I was checking out your content, which I highly suggest everybody do after this conversation. And I saw you say that in regards to leadership, instead of just attributing a lack of drive to an entire generation, maybe it's our leadership methods that need to evolve. And that comes with awareness and consciousness. And I just thought that was so profound.
Well, UPS did that interestingly, since I'm such a FedEx guy, as you might imagine. But UPS figured this out a decade ago, and there was a 60-minute segment on what UPS did. UPS figured out that their newest employees, the ones that drive the UPS trucks, don't like sitting in a classroom and learning how with your right hand you put the key in the key. They built a mini city, and they put new employees on trucks in what was effectively a 500,000 square foot staged city to drive around within a teacher in the truck with them to teach them how to run a route. Not because it was a cheap way to do education, it wasn't, but because they something that could break through with this new and next generation of workers that they had to have to be successful. So that's an example of a company saw it and remediated against it. It's just, that's very powerful stuff when I see things and read about things like that.
Yeah, I agree. Couldn't agree more, actually. And it's good to always take responsibility, right? Like instead of blaming, what can we do to be a little bit more effective with our approach? And I think that's just a good philosophy to have with everything in life. Even if something's not necessarily your fault, just assume responsibility.
Well, and I agree with you completely. But when I spent 25 years either a CEO or a founder or president or something, and what I would always do in the annual reviews, and frankly, when I hired people, I would say exactly getting to that point. What do you want me to do in order to lower any barricade that you might find in front of you? How accessible do you want to be? How accessible do you want me to be for you? How quickly do we need to correspond? Because my job is going to be helping you be successful. The answer to the question, was I successful or not in helping you be successful, is the one I have to hear from you. You have to believe I was helpful. So you have to tell me what you're going to need from me. And everyone's got different. I was telling someone at breakfast this morning, I had of sales, big guy, big job, had a sales force selling over $1 million worth of our product. He said, please, what I like from you is do not make me present in front of the board of directors PowerPoint slides. And I was like, well, I am dyslexic and I can't read the slides effectively enough to make a good presentation. I can make a presentation to beat the band to any group, but don't make me conform to the way you would like the other members of the team. Of course, the answer is, of course, we would never make it. And that's the kind of feedback I think anybody needs to be an effective leader.
So good. 100%. You do so many things well, but one specifically that I love is your ability to face difficult tasks head on. What is your approach for that?
Well, I always like to get things off my desk, right? And I learned this lesson, which I did put in one of my more recent posts on LinkedIn, about you get the stuff at work that you like doing, you do for free. You get paid to do the work you don't like doing. And I learned that relative to a firing that I'd started a this person was on a short list to be fired. And when I finally agreed with my boss, said, yeah, I definitely need to fire. I'd never fired anybody. I was, almost 30, didn't quite know what to do. And so I dodged it. And he'd say, have you fired her yet? Have you fired her? And I'd keep making up a different excuse every week. And then finally he said, you know what? I fired people forever and ever. I met her first before I brought you in here. I can fire her for you. And he said, I get it. Why don't you just let me fire? And I said, well, okay, I'm doing it. Yeah, that'd be great. He said, great. He spun around his desk. He picked up his phone. He dialed the head of HR. He said, hey, would you send me Gary Kusin's next paycheck? Yeah, just send it to me. Perfect. Thank you. And he hung up. I had a mortgage. I had little kids. I said, what is that? He said, well, I'm going to get your next paycheck. What's wrong with that? And I said, well, I need my paycheck. And he said, well, if you want me to do your work, the stuff you're paid to do, I don't mind doing it, but I got to get paid for it. You get paid to do the stuff you don't want to do. And you clearly don't want to fire her. I've been talking to you for 6 straight weeks. And I'm happy to fire her, but I'm going to get that paycheck. And and I needed it. I said, I'll go fire her right now. And I did. But what a lesson.
Yeah. It had to become very real for you, create that sense of urgency.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's never easy, I guess, to let somebody go. But just like anything else, it's a skill that could be developed.
Well, yeah. And I actually had Jack Welch coach me a little bit on that. I talk about that in the book, but it is, to me, a bad termination. It's preparation and a bad goal setting experience in a company and an annual review process. And the whole thing is all wrapped together to the point where, and I wrote this in a LinkedIn post recently, to the point that I had a thing that at Kinko's that got fired in the company and was surprised. I needed to know. And I would talk to the supervisor because that to me is unacceptable. I need to be open and honest with you at our annual review. I need to tell you what you're doing well, what you're not doing well, and which things that I'm telling you could, if you don't figure out how to do them right, and go through it in great detail. And then when the time comes and I say, well, Craig, you know what? We've talked about this. You can't deliver on your commitment. That hurts my commitment to the board, to the company. You can't be here anymore. But I can't, that wouldn't be a surprise. But if you said, what? Why didn't you tell me? I'd have done anything, which is a fair thing to say if you've never been told that if you don't get these things right. And so, so it's all the whole thing from literally the life cycle of a team member company. If the company is going to succeed and be known as a great place to work, it better be good at administering from the interviews to the termination. I think it's really an important part of running a successful company.
It's almost as if you don't really fire anyone, they fire themselves, because right from the beginning, you're very intentional on identifying what their commitments are. And if they don't meet them, it's pretty self-explanatory.
And you know what? You're right about, and I hadn't thought about that way. There is no question that for the people to whom we have said, get this right, you cannot stay in the company. If they're not getting it right, frankly, they do fire themselves. They go get another job and they quit because they don't want to get fired. They know it's coming. And frankly, the company's better off because they can move more quickly to find someone who can know that sort of stuff. And what Jack Welch taught me was you can do all this in an extremely humane way. Yeah, I had some posts on my LinkedIn when I wrote something about this. What's the big deal? You bring them in, you sit them down, you tell them they're fired, you give them their wallet, you give them an envelope with their last week's pay in it, and you send them out the door. And it's like, I'd invite you to think about that whole process a little differently. And it's just, humanity is important. And honesty and integrity is important, and those are important. And those are, on the one hand, those are soft things, but on the other hand, in your organization, whether you founded it 10 years ago or 10 minutes ago, people look to the leadership to make a decision about, is this an honorable company? Is this its people? Well, all those sorts of things, and they watch management's actions very closely, and their attitudes and how they walk and when they're on the floor talking with people, all those things.
Yeah, this is so good. We'll land the plane with this. A couple times you mentioned Jack and mentors and so forth. How important is it for you to surround yourself with the right mentors and people that might be a little bit further ahead that can guide you?
And I didn't know it. I happened onto those things. I've been an obstacle as a little kid, but I've also been self-aware enough to know that from the first time I heard, oh, by the way, our operating partner over your business is Jack Welch, and you're going to be doing quarterly business reviews with him. And after you have that, oh no moment, you start going, this opportunity, and I'll see how good he is, and he'll call me out if I'm not, frankly, back to your very first comment, authentic, if I'm not authentic. So it's, it's all a good virtuous cycle. And if you stick with it, the more you learn, then you reach a point where you go, who am I kidding? I could not have achieved this without the team members that were assembled, without the mentors I had, without the board people I had, without the chairman, if there was a chairman involved. And that's, for me, it's always been, wow, how could I not want to help level the playing field for people who haven't had it? And, let's face it, I've had advantages. I can make a list of advantages in my life, even for the times when I thought I was put upon, wasn't happy, wasn't this, wasn't that. I had things that a lot of people don't have, ranging from my skin to all those sorts of things are real things. And so I am very interested in helping underserved people from groups that are traditionally underserved level their playing field, doing whatever I can do for them. I feel like that's probably the biggest need in the world of mentoring, and a role that I can fill, and it fills me up while I'm hopefully helping them.
Yeah, I know it does. One of the many reasons why I love you so much. This was unbelievable. Before we leave the plane with a couple, maybe one-word answers, rapid fire. Real quick, of all the things that you have going on right now, Gary, what are you most excited about? How can our whole community support you?
Well, I think my wife started a company 14 years ago, and who knew? She and her partner were the dogs that caught the car, and now we're building a huge new commercial kitchen. They make cookies, and it's like I am getting to be an advisor and watching and being involved. And I have to tell you, that's so incredibly satisfactory for me to spend my time doing. It's turned into a large national business. This is not a small cookie company. It's called JK Chocolate. It's something else. So I'm loving doing that.
I love that. Heck yeah. Okay. We'll land with a little bit of fun, rapid fire, maybe one or two word answers. Are you ready for me?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Gary, your favorite movie?
Oh, wow. Frozen.
Good one.
Yeah, watch it with my granddaughters. Yeah.
Good answer. Okay. Your favorite guilty pleasure?
Cookies and cream ice cream.
Ooh, great answer. Okay. Couple more. Your favorite workout?
It's doing the Peloton, seeing if I can make 3 miles at 4 miles.
I love it.
Walking, not running.
Oh, fair enough. Two more. Your favorite book, not including yours?
Shoe Dog, the Phil Knight story.
Nike.
That
Classic.
number one. That's the Nike. That's a Nike one, and second by Jan Winter, the founder of Rolling Stone magazine.
What was the second one?
Called Like a Rolling Stone by Jan Winter, who is the founder of Rolling Stone magazine, that takes you through the founding of that magazine, the history of rock and roll. And it is, what a great book.
I love it.
You're there. He's there with Mick Jagger, John Lennon. He's there with all of them, and how he came up with this idea and the hurdles that were in front of them to build an enormous counterculture rag to what it's become since. Just a terrific book.
I love it, and I'm going to look it up as soon as that we wrap this up. So thank you for that. And the last one, very deep stuff. Your favorite musician?
Gosh, I have so many. I guess probably Billy Joel, great songwriter.
Billy Joel?
Great music. Yeah, great songwriter,
Phenomenal.
great music. His lyrics,
great.
Piano Man, I could listen to Piano Man 10 times in a row.
Same. Well, this was unbelievable, Gary. I want you to know you're the definition of authenticity, perspective, and kindness. Thank you so much for stopping by today and dropping these priceless, juicy nuggets.
You are very welcome. I've enjoyed it thoroughly.